Hi, everybody. This video is for anyone who was absent for the second class of RIOT BABY, second class in Unit 2, or who showed up late enough that you missed the beginning, or who was present for all of it but wouldn't mind the recap or zoned out or something. Here we go. I'm going to share my screen and show you what it is that you missed. So here is Brightspace. We are in Unit 2, and we are starting with a review of what the homework was, the one-sentence summary. So I'm going to very quickly show you the student samples so you have a sense of whether you're on track or not. These are the student samples. I compiled them from a number of different students, and they're a combination of good, better, and really great, all of which would get full credit. If yours don't look like this, then you're doing something less than good. So the very first section of South Central that we read out loud in class, Ella realizes how much she dislikes South Central after Blood gang members threatened the student on her bus that was flashing Crip gang signs at them. Right? Perfectly sufficient, gives some details. We understand everything that's going on. It's not too vague. Great. Ella and her grandmother meet Latanya and her baby Jelani. And I would have thrown an and in here. And Ella experiences one of her episodes and has a dream of Jelani growing up getting shot by gang members on his way home from school. So here we see that she's got her magical powers, etc. Let me fast forward to the first section of Harlem. Ella is awoken by Kev in the morning as a result of a rat scurrying in the room, who shrieks in fear and pleads for Ella to do her thing, which eventually caused its brain to explode, leaving Mama to clean up the mess, which upsets her because she worries that others will find out, and as a result smacks Ella upside the head, reminding her of the importance of keeping her superpowers a secret. Excellent, very detailed. And then here is an example of one. This whole thing, you can read all of these as you like on Brightspace. Here is one that shows that you don't have to necessarily be overly academic in order to have a complete sentence that is fully formed and ends with a period and covers everything very thoroughly. So this student wrote, "Damn, so basically Kev is with some friends downstairs to ignore his mom, and Ella's fighting, but some noises were made upstairs. So Kev walks up only to see Ella choking her mom, Darth Vader style. And Kev tries to stop, but Ella's too powerful. Then things calm down and Ella is on the floor apologizing, and Kev and her mom is now afraid of Ella." There are a number of sections of this book that make you say, damn. So I wouldn't necessarily encourage you to do that in a paper, but you can certainly have fun with assignments and not necessarily lose really good academic analytical thinking, because here you go. So that is an example of what I hoped your homework did look like. Here's an example of what I really, really hope it didn't look like if you want to take a peek at that. Okay, so that's on Brightspace. The next thing that we talked about was defining Afrofuturism as a genre. RIOT BABY is an example of an Afrofuturistic novel, but only a little. There's not like, futuristic like spaceships and lasers and all that. It's just towards the end of the book, it's set in the near future, which means something that could plausibly be existing, 5 or 10 years from now in terms of technology that Tochi Onyebuchi writes about at the very end. But, it's also about siblings who have superpowers, Ella and Kev, particularly Ella. And that, that's very science fiction, science fantasy, although it might not necessarily be futuristic. But it counts as the genre. So what is Afrofuturism? This handout says whether or not you know the term, you will recognize it because you know what Wakanda is and Black Panther, and that's Afrofuturistic. You may have heard of the jazz musician Sun Ra, who dressed like this and told everybody he was from Saturn, embraced that alien god kind of thing. And then these are the paintings of, I'm probably going to say this wrong, Jean-Michel Basquiat. He was American, French name, American boy, man, but he died in his 20s, so he's kind of always a boy. Look him up. His stuff is amazing. His paintings are amazing, and they count it as Afrofuturistic. So it can be movies, it can be music, it can be paintings. So what is Afrofuturism? It's a set of aesthetics and philosophies which are frequently presented through literature, performance, and visual art. So in this case, we're looking at literature because RIOT BABY is literature. Works in this genre are defined by the intersection of African and diasporic traditions, magical realism, and science fiction. Diaspora means when a group of people from a specific country have to flee, they have to scatter around the globe because of either a war, civil war, colonization, some awful, like there was ethnic cleansing, everybody ran away. So you can think of a number of different cultures who had to completely abandon their homeland and resettle. And then sometimes, generations later, there's another trauma, and then those communities that are now established in other countries have to flee once again. And so the further and the further you get from what you think of as your traditional customs, and the more you pick up customs and cultures from these new countries you settle in, and you feel a growing sense of disconnect from what you consider your home country, regardless of whether you are recently from there or generations from there. All of these things are called the diaspora. And there are different diasporic traditions. Some communities try very hard to hang on to their own culture, so they always feel connected, and others try very hard to just blend in with the new country, get these kids speaking the new language and making friends, and that way they won't stand out as different. So there can be very different interpretations of how diasporic you want to feel. So for Afrofuturism, it often places Black characters in contexts that are traditionally whitewashed, specifically space, meaning outer space, and sci-fi, science fiction, heroism. In America, anyway, in the European and American traditions, were always white genres. You look back at the earlier days of like Star Wars and Star Trek, and they might have cast one Black actor and everybody else is white. They might have cast one Asian character and everybody else is white, and they called that diversity, and that's not. So Afrofuturism also repurposes classic sci-fi tropes, and a trope means like a very predictable or stereotypical character or situation. So they will reuse these like same old tried and true characters and storylines that you see in other sci-fi to produce a commentary on issues unique to the Black experience. Afrofuturism mixes sci-fi and social justice. So it is a place, just like Tochi Onyebuchi said in those videos that we watched in the first class in Unit 2, you can grapple with problems that exist in the here and now by putting them into a science fiction universe where through the vehicle of storytelling, they can resonate with more listeners. Here is where it gets a little difficult. This is the last paragraph. Valerie Thomas, a Black American scholar, puts it bluntly. She says, "The apocalypse already happened. The aliens came." And she is talking about the apocalypse in the sense that it was like the death of the world as her people knew it. And she means colonization. She means the aliens were the white Europeans who showed up in Africa and destroyed cultures, communities, countries, like that is where you see the aliens come down and colonize Earth. She's saying like that is a science fiction metaphor for things that already happened in her community. So in other words, the displacement, loss, and marginalization of African, diasporic, and otherwise communities happened during the long histories of colonization and exploitation. And the struggle led to different conceptions of when and how a dystopian future could come about, or whether perhaps it already has. And you'll remember, this is also something Tochi Onyebuchi said in the Comedy Central link, that for some people, a dystopia is an imagined future of oppression and exploitation and misery. And for other people, it's already here. That already describes exactly what their day-to-day life is. So this history has fed the imaginations that create characters, worlds, and concepts that have never and could never come from the white minds that have long dominated sci-fi and tech fields. You can argue that humanity is humanity and anybody can imagine anything. So it's not that it could never come from white minds, or maybe it could never come from white minds because these are whole new looks at things that hadn't been portrayed before, because they're coming from Black minds. In this case specifically, anybody who can trace their roots to Africa. So that is Afrofuturism. And this is specific to, it can be the African community or an African diasporic community, meaning if you're in America and you're Black, you're part of the diasporic community, because that means that you no longer live in the continent you can trace your ancestors to. The African community is obviously the people who live in Africa on the continent, in the different countries who are still dealing with the colonization that's imposed upon them, and wars. And so that is also Afrofuturism. However, there is a second word to describe Afrofuturism that is specific to the African continent, because Afrofuturism has begun to feel like a very American idea as we deal with the topics and struggles that are specific to America, to modern day America. And then that's where I'm going to next. So next this is the Wikipedia link for Afrofuturism, and you can see, Cyborg. This is a good example of Afrofuturism. you know, this looks like an art, but in TV shows and movies, etc. If you skim through here, I'm certainly not going to go through this, you'll see examples, 21st century examples of different singers and videos and the fashion that is, you know, that Solange Knowles, so she says it, Rihanna, Beyonce have worn that looks very futuristic, very Afrofuturistic, Janelle Monáe, and then, you know, you go right on down and see there's Black Panther, and it'll give you all kinds of examples, literature and comics, etc. So down here, there is a writer who we're going to look at in a moment. Her name is Nnedi Okorafor. She's Nigerian American, and somewhere on here it links to her word, which is African futurism. She spells it as all one word, and that is how she differentiates it from Afrofuturism. So one is specific to America, and the other one is the continent of Africa as it exists today. So here is Nnedi Okorafor. So just like Tochi Onyebuchi, she is Nigerian American, and she writes for young adults as well as adults. And there is a lot of magic in her books, and there is a lot of like sci-fi in her books. So she gave an interview. This is 17 minutes long. It might say that it's 24 minutes, but that's because the second part of the interview isn't her. Here is a transcript if you want to skim or, you know, read what she says. But I selected just a couple of excerpts to play to give you the highlights, because that's what this video is for, the highlights. You can go back and listen to the whole thing if you want. I am not actually sure if I have this enabled for sound or not. So I'm going to pause my recording. Hang on just one moment here. Actually, I'm going to pause my sharing, and now I'm going to share my screen again and see if share sound. Good thing. Okay. Share sound. Okay, so I've already clicked on this. It's running at the bottom, and I'm going to fast forward to minute 3:20. And I'm going to listen to it on 1.2 speed. So it's not too fast, but still fast. So it'll be less than a minute. And what it is that she's saying here is how what is considered maybe fictional in America, if you write about, you know, mysticism or magic or spirituality in books in America, in Nigeria, that's part of life. So when her parents would take her to Nigeria to visit her grandparents, she learned what mysticism was and how it was just part of life. And that really influenced her writing. And it also, she explains in this clip why she's interested in sci-fi and wanted to insert characters who look like her into sci-fi, because, you know, she hadn't really seen anybody who looks like her in sci-fi. So we're going to minute 3:20, and it is right here. Okay, let's go.
That was where the fantastical aspect came from. And also a lot of it comes from being Nigerian American. And so like from a young age, my parents were taking my siblings and I back to Nigeria to meet with our relatives and kind of know our heritage and all of that. And so whenever we would go, we would encounter, because it's part of the culture, this mysticism. And like, it was just normal. It was normal. But because we were American Nigerians, it was new to us and we noticed it. And so like for me, when I started writing, those things came forward very quickly. The science fiction part, like I said, I grew up reading some, but the genre of science fiction did not attract me because I wasn't seeing, I didn't need to see reflections of myself per se, but I needed to feel like I could exist in those worlds, possibly exist. And so I'd read these narratives and they just came across as very cold, white, and male. And so I couldn't connect very well with the science fiction that I was reading. So it wasn't like a big genre for me. It was those trips to Nigeria that did it.
Okay, so that's your clip one. Clip two, I'm going to start at minute 6:01, and that's where she talks about the word akata, which is Nigerian slang for an American Black person, like as they differentiate from a Nigerian Black person, and they don't care if your parents are Nigerian. Like once you have American culture in you, then you are akata, and they say that that's just like an eye-rolling way of talking about Americans, but it is apparently like kind of like a really nasty word, at least according to Nnedi Okorafor, who has quite a lot to say about that. And she wrote a series of books called the Akata Witch books about a teenager. So there's a Akata witch, there's a Akata woman. Well, I'll let her tell you. So we're going to do one more minute here, get 2 minutes 6, and Okay.
Complexity of it. First, I want to address the word akata, right? So akata is a terrible word. It's a terrible word. It's a horrible, horrible word. And the thing is, when you talk to some Nigerians, they'll be like, oh no, it's a neutral word. It just describes Black Americans and it's fine. Anyone who has been called that term and fits into the category of the definition knows that it is not a nice word. It's not a nice word. It's a derogatory term for Black Americans, but that also includes Nigerian Americans as well. So this is a word that I have grown up hearing and being called and grappling with and yelling about. And so when I wrote the first one, Akata Witch, in the book itself, it wasn't that she was called Akata Witch. It was originally Akata Bitch. That was the, that was the term, because that's the term that I actually knew. And then I was called an Akata by some man because he thought I was mouthing off, and he's like, "Oh, you American girls, you just have no respect for what," and he called me that. And I got angry, and I'm like, I'm putting that in a title. I'm going to be the first person to put that word in a title of a book. And so it was like a kind of a taking back, and it was me being audacious.
Yes, it was. Okay, now the last, it's actually 3 minutes, but since we're listening to it at 1.2, it'll be faster. The last 3 minutes I'm going to share with you are her discussion of what Afrofuturism means, how she got herself in trouble with the American audience, and how she decided that there should be another term for futurism that is specific to the continent of Africa and not being completely taken over by American concepts. And so that starts at minute 8:35. And all right, so this will be the longest clip, and then we're done, and let's go.
Honestly.
Mm-hmm. Sunny is the main character in a new book. She is the so-called Akata woman. She's Nigerian American, just like you. And this issue you're talking about of distinctive Black communities, it reminds me of a term that you've coined to describe your work, African futurism. This came about, as I understand it, as a response to the label of Afrofuturism, which you used to subscribe to. It's become sort of voguish term when we talk about Black sci-fi in the U.S. But you wrote a blog post that is, to me, sort of a manifesto, and it says, actually, I'm trying to do something different. So what did you think was causing your work to be misunderstood under the label that we know, Afrofuturism?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the misunderstandings of what I'm trying to say come from what are called the diaspora wars. And it's like, everyone wants their stories told. Everyone wants their stories to be important and significant. And it's caused a lot of, this is not a word, but I'm going to say it anyway, territoriality.
I'm tracking that. That sounds right to me.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. So,
I sure do.
Everyone's being very territorial. And I remember it just came because, I had an issue because I was seeing Black science fiction being couched in terms of the United States. Like the United States is focal point, and it is the majority of the stories are coming from the United. So it's like images, like imaginings of the future were coming from one part of the world where the majority of Black people are not. And I think a lot of people forget that the majority of Black people are on the continent of Africa. And that's fine,
Yeah.
That makes sense. And I remember I'd said this was what caused a lot of problems. I had said that the majority of Afrofuturism should be written by people who are on the continent of Africa. When I said that, there was a huge backlash. I had a lot of people, I'm talking from probably in the thousands, telling me, this is ours. We're Americans. We're Black Americans, and this is ours. This is Afrofuturism is ours. And so once I started hearing that, I'm like, okay, that's fine. Okay, so that's when I knew there needed to be another term. There needed to be a more diverse way of looking at this because it's a big world. Culturally, it's a big world. And I'm saying this as an American.
Yeah. The more views, the better. The more angles.
Right.
That's it. I hope you listen to the whole thing, or at least read the transcript. And then, speaking of the continent of Africa and the country of Nigeria in particular, here is the best comic book site I think I've ever seen in my life. This is the Comic Republic, is a Nigerian company. They're putting out all of these titles. I downloaded Guardian Prime, was their first character that they created. These are just the PDFs. So this is the first edition, the second and the third, the fourth. And I was going to have everybody read Guardian Prime, but there's so many comics on there that are beautiful, and I mean, quite frankly, better. That I enjoyed more anyway. So this is the link here to the full site. So if you go in here, you will see some beautiful, amazing artwork, and you can click on see all of our titles here, or up here where it says read comics, see full catalog. And then all of these different series, they made this one into a movie, apparently. I would say this one is probably not meant for your age. I think she is. I mean, there are so many, and each one is more gorgeous than the next, and the art is different. And I hope that you go on here and just read anything and everything that you want that looks interesting to you. Some of them are new titles. There's only like 3 issues, and they're pretty short. Each issue is not, it's not a book. It's like, a few pages, and most of it is art. This one, this guy is pretty Batman. He's rescuing people who are in a cage, and when he finds out, he frees them, what's been happening to them, and he asks them in terms of getting back at their captors, he says, justice or vengeance, and they get to pick, and it's really cool. Yeah, so look, there's a ton. So your homework is nothing is due in writing. I don't want you to write a single summary or a sentence or a book report or anything. I'm not going to ask you questions. There's not going to be a quiz. Before I see you in next week's class, you'll have to finish RIOT BABY. We already read the first 2 chapters, obviously. There's only 2 more chapters. There's Rikers, which takes place in Rikers, which is the jail in New York City. And then it goes to Watts, which is back in LA, another neighborhood in Los Angeles. So the book is like LA, New York, LA. Read the last 2 chapters, and then take all the rest of your time this week and just absorb yourself in any of these titles that you love. Maybe there's just one that you'll click on and you'll read the whole thing. Whatever it is you choose, just go in deeply enough that you can speak about it at length with details, that you can use it in your paper. And I hope you love every second of it. That's it. You know where to find me if you have questions about anything, and we're off. I'll see you in next class. Bye.